Part 23. I Can See the Laws of Things. Author, Yitiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 221. In an instant, they were far away in Jianghai City. In the open space in the middle of a huge courtyard, there stood a stone platform, with a pale sword blade stuck on it. On both sides of the sword blade, sat a young man in white robes and a young man in black robes. The young man in white robes sat cross-legged, with long hair flying. He carried the black and yellow mother sword on his back, and his whole body exuded spiritual energy fluctuations that were completely different from this era. But the body of the other young man in black was full of hostility. Swarms of red insects were crawling on his skin, and vertical eyes were crawling on his forehead. He looked extremely dangerous. Horrible. And at this moment, suddenly, the sword blade inserted on the stone platform trembled. The next moment, the sword blade broke away from the stone platform in an instant, rose into the sky with a scream, and disappeared into the distance in an instant. The two teenagers opened their eyes instantly and looked in shock at the sky where the sword blade was retreating. The instructor's sword moved. Could it be that Instructor Lin An is back? The young man in black robe suddenly raised his head, with a fanatical look in his eyes. Sir Lin. The young man in white robe stood up immediately, turned around and said solemnly. Lin Zheng, you follow Chief Lin An's sword to check out the situation. I will tell Miss Banmen about this immediately. Okay, Lin Zheng nodded. He barely hesitated. The next moment, a pair of huge insect wings suddenly grew out of his back and flew into the sky in an instant. Dao Yi looked at the sky, clenched his fists, and said. Sir Lin En, only you can solve the troubles encountered in the Zhuzhu territory now. The next moment, he immediately turned around and ran towards the interior of the manor. Hongduan Mountains. With the sound of a sword in the sky, a pale sword instantly fell from the sky and landed steadily in Lin An's hand. Old friend, long time no see. Lin An smiled lightly, and his fingers slowly brushed the pale sword blade. The blade of the sword trembled and whistled continuously. It seemed to be jumping, trembling, and cheering. That day, after Lin An suffered the attack of the Honkai Eye, he left this sword in the wasteland. However, as long as this sword still exists in this world, Lin An can summon it at any time. Come. And at the next moment, a hoarse shout suddenly came from the distant sky. Sir Lin. Lin turned his head and looked in that direction. In the sky, he saw a young man with wings on his back flying eagerly in his direction. Along with him came the swarm of scarlet worms that covered the sky and the sun. The entire insect swarm was agitated. The moment they saw Lin En, they immediately increased their speed to the extreme, almost turning into a rolling storm, instantly covering Lin An's body. They were jumping for joy and excitement, as if they had found their father. And at the next moment, the young man with wings on his back suddenly landed in front of Lin En, looked at Lin En excitedly, bent his legs and knelt down. Sir. You finally showed up. His voice was almost choked, and his whole body was trembling with great excitement. Lin En smiled and said, long time no see, Lin Zheng. They haven't seen each other for several months since he left Jianghai City. Lin Zheng said excitedly, Sir, I miss you so much. When I knew, instructor, that you were fighting against 3 world-class experts in the East China Sea, I only regretted that I was not there at the time. I couldn't share your worries. Lin An smiled slightly and said, it seems that your strength has improved a lot during this period. Lin Zheng wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes and said, after you left, instructor, I didn't dare to slack off for a moment and practiced every day. Later, after the insects came back, I also completely changed my physique because of their power. Now I have become very good, stronger. He suddenly clenched his fist, with a determined look in his eyes. Lin An smiled lightly and said, haha, you can see it? Get up. Tell me what happened during my absence. Also, is my sister okay? Lin Zheng stood up, nodded vigorously, and said, Miss King Ian has always been very good, but you have been away for too long. Miss, she misses you too much, but fortunately, Miss Banmeng has been taking care of you. Lin En was startled and said, Banmeng is also in Jianghai City. Lin Zheng nodded and said, yes, after that day, Miss Banmeng learned that you were, by. He turned his head and glanced at the woman standing next to Lin En, who was at least 80, similar to Banmeng, but more mature. He glanced at Lin En's face, and then at Lin En's arm that Kimeng was holding. Then quickly lowered his head and said, after being taken away by her sister, she returned to your residence in Jianghai City, sir. During this period, Mr. Chen Daoming wanted to take Miss Banmeng back more than once, but Miss Banmeng refused. She said that she would Jianghai City is waiting for your return, sir. Kimeng was startled. After hearing Banmeng's name, she couldn't help but raise her head blankly and look at Lin En's profile. Lin En turned to look at Lin Zheng and said, okay, I already know the general situation. Please tell me about the recent situation in the Kyushu region. As soon as these words came out, the excited expression on Lin Zheng's face slowly subsided, and a hint of gloom appeared between his eyebrows. I'm afraid the current situation in the Kyushu territory is not very optimistic. Lin En raised his eyebrows and said, tell me, what's going on? Lin Zheng raised his head, took a deep breath, and said, sir, this is what happened. Lin Zheng immediately told Lin En everything that had happened in the Jiuzhu domain in the past few months. The day after Lin En killed the 3 world-class masters, the news spread rapidly to the whole world at lightning speed. The whole world was shocked. Almost everyone knew that there had been a drastic change in the Jiuzhu domain. The Ling family, the Luo family, and the Bailey family, who had shared the world with the Chen family, were all liquidated overnight. After losing the other 3 families, the overall strength of the Jiuzhu domain also declined like a Waterloo. Although the Chen family tried hard to control the situation in the country after the incident. But despite this, a considerable number of people who were once loyal to the 3 families still refused Chen Daoming's solicitation. They occupied one city after another, openly challenging the God capital. In just a few months, the Jiuzhu domain has been divided into more than a dozen regions. After listening, Lin En frowned, although he had expected it long ago. But he still didn't expect that things had gotten so serious. Lin Zheng said solemnly, moreover, just half a month ago, at least 8 top cities in the east formed an alliance to resist the capital of God. They continued to grow along the eastern coast. During the period when the strength of the 9 provinces dropped sharply, they had already faintly formed a force that could confront the Chen family. Lin En frowned and said, where is Chen Daoming? Lin Zheng said solemnly, Mr. Chen Daoming is seriously injured. He has not recovered from his injuries in the past few months. It is precisely because of this that the rebel forces are so arrogant. Moreover, the 8-tribe alliance received assistance from foreign forces. A few days ago, the capital of God sent a large number of troops to attack, but in the end they were defeated. Now, the rebels have started a war with the capital of God. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xianyue. Chapter 222. Lin En raised his head and said expressionlessly, I understand, this matter started with me, and it will naturally end with me. I will give an explanation to the entire Jiuzhu territory. He turned to look at Lin Zheng and said, what's the situation in Jianghai City? Lin Zheng clasped his fists and said, a few months ago, Jianghai City was also attacked, but Mr. Chen Daoming assigned heavy troops to garrison it. Now Jianghai City has become the largest fortress second only to Chengdu. Dao Yi and I have been Jianghai City organized defense and never left. Lin En nodded, turned to look north, and said deeply. I understand. You should return to Jianghai City now, do a good job of defense, and tell my sister and the others that I am back. Lin Zheng was startled and said, aren't you going back to Jianghai City now? Lin En raised his head and said, I want to go to the divine capital first. Lin Zheng immediately clasped his fists and said, yes, Sir Lin En. I will return to Jianghai City now. After saying that, Lin Zheng immediately turned around and flew in the direction he came from, and soon disappeared above the clouds. He had always obeyed Lin's orders. Kimeng turned her head and looked at Lin En's side face, and said worriedly, Lin. Lin En raised his head and said, follow me to see your father first. Your father's injury should be very serious. With your father's character, if his situation had not reached an extremely critical moment, he would never allow the Kyushu territory to appear like this. Such a situation. Kimeng nodded, although her relationship with Chen Daoming was very bad. But Chen Daoming is her father after all, and she absolutely doesn't want to see her father have an accident. Let's go. The next moment, Lin En took Kimeng into the sky and flew towards the divine capital. Lin En looked deeply to the north, and the strong wind blew through his clothes. I'm Lin, I'm back. About the same time, north. Quick. Quick. Hold on. We must not let them break through our defense line. We need more troops. We need support. Damn you guys. On the wasteland less than 200 kilometers away from Komodo. With a long cry, a goshawk passed through the clouds. Looking down from high in the sky, you can see that the entire wasteland is filled with explosions and smoke. Thousands of people were fighting on the battlefield. The soldiers of Chengdu built a defense line of dozens of kilometers consisting of trenches and barbed wire on the wasteland. Countless soldiers screamed and crossed the barbed wire fence to fight with the rebels. There were explosions and dust everywhere, and screams resounded throughout the sky. What's the situation on the front line? Who is the commander here? Report to me immediately. A national-level warrior god wearing a battle armor and leading a dozen generals pushed open the door of the front-line fortress, walked into the command post, and shouted. His name is Chen Su, and he is one of the top combat powers of the Chen family. Since the army they sent out to conquer the Eastern Alliance of 8 tribes was defeated a few days ago, more and more forces that were on the sidelines have joined the rebels. This also makes an already difficult situation even more complicated. And because of the defeat of the Chengdu army, the army of the 8 Clans Alliance took advantage of the victory and pursued it. In just 2 days, they reached less than 200 miles outside their Chengdu. If it were done before, this kind of thing would be almost impossible. The command post was full of busy military personnel. There were explosions one after another, and a large amount of dust poured in from the gaps. I am the commander here, Mr. Chen Su, you are finally here. The commander immediately rushed towards the national martial god. Chen Su frowned and said, report. The commander saluted and solemnly said, Sir, our armies are fighting outside. Above their conventional combat power, they are no match for us at all. But the tricky thing is that their top combat power is far better than ours. According to our observation, there is at least one national-level powerhouse in their army, and there are at least more than 10 generals. As soon as these words came out, the expressions of the soldiers who followed Chen Su changed. More than double-digit generals. How is this possible? Chen Su frowned suddenly and said, where did they get so many strong men? As far as I know, the only country that supports their rebel activities is Britain. I don't believe it. They really put all the top people in their country together. All the combat power has been sent to our Kyushu region. The commander solemnly said, the matter may be more difficult than we imagined. Although Britain is the only force that has officially announced its intervention, secretly, several other powerful countries no less than our Kyushu region may also play an important role in it. With their ambition, they will never let go of the opportunity to overthrow our Kyushu region. Chen Su suddenly gritted his teeth and punched the table, causing the table to fall apart instantly. This bunch of damn jackals, if it weren't for Mr. Chen Daoming's serious injury, how could we in the Zhuzhu territory allow them to be so arrogant? The commander immediately stepped forward, cupped his fists and said, Mr. Chen Su, the battle situation has now reached a critical point. On behalf of all the soldiers here, I ask you to take action immediately. If it is too late, the consequences will be disastrous. Chen Su gritted his teeth, turned around suddenly, and shouted. Everyone listen to the order and rush to the battlefield with me immediately. I don't care who is standing behind them, even if it is a dragon, let them take care of me. Let's go. The dozen town generals immediately shouted, yes. But at this moment, suddenly, a huge explosion sounded. The fortress above their heads exploded instantly, and countless rubble fell to the ground. Enemy attack, the commander's face changed instantly. The next moment, Chen Su suddenly raised his head, waved his hand, and shouted. Who? In an instant, the entire dome was turned into countless powders in that wave. The blood and energy that exploded from his body instantly surged for more than 10 kilometers. And at this moment, bursts of laughter came from the sky. I have been waiting for you for a long time. I thought that your Chen family really didn't have anyone to show off except Chen Daoming. A man with blonde hair, sunken eye sockets, and a suit that was out of tune with the environment here stood there a few hundred meters above the sky. Behind him were floating golden transparent wings, with a faint smile on his face, but his eyes were indifferent. At a glance, it can be seen that he is not from Zhuzhu, but a typical Western face. Chen Su suddenly raised his head, his eyes locked on the man instantly, he gritted his teeth and said his name word by word. It's you. Griffin. There are only so many people who can reach the realm of national-level powerhouses in the whole world. And Griffin is the long-known national-level god of law in the British Empire. Chen Su was not surprised by the appearance of this man. Because on the international stage, this man named Griffin is a thorough war maniac. When the Zhuzhu domain changed drastically decades ago, this man had come to the Zhuzhu domain to get a share, but he was not Chen Daoming's opponent at all. After leaving an eye, he left the Zhuzhu domain in disgrace. Chen Su gritted his teeth and said, why, you left an eye in our Zhuzhu domain back then, today, are you planning to leave your life here too? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 223. Griffin slowly stretched out his hand, gently touched his left eye, and said with a faint smile. Oh, so you still remember this eye? Of course, I also remember it, and I remember it very clearly. Since I am here this time, I naturally want to take revenge, not just Chen Daoming, but all of you Chen family, all will die. Chen Su narrowed his eyes and said, then let's see if you have this ability. Griffin raised the corner of his mouth and said, it won't take long to deal with a bastard like you. After killing you, it will be Chen Daoming's turn. And I heard that Chen Daoming has two very beautiful people after I destroy your Chen family, I don't mind having fun with them. Chen Su was instantly furious and said, the madman shall die. The next moment, Chen Su suddenly jumped up and rushed towards the sky. The billowing blood instantly enveloped his whole body. The strength of the national martial god must not be underestimated. If placed in a medium-sized country, he would be the highest ruler-level existence. Almost instantly, Chen Su rushed in front of Griffin. The fists wrapped in blood fired bursts of sonic booms one after another. If this punch were to fall on him, even the mountain would probably explode. But what no one noticed was that the corners of Griffin's mouth curved slightly. You fell into a trap. At that moment, Chen Su's expression changed drastically. He didn't have time to react at all, and the space on both sides of his body exploded instantly. I saw a man wearing a white warrior uniform suddenly burst through the space, and a sword light flashed through his cold eyes, and instantly pierced Chen Su's chest. In the broken space on the other side, an extremely strong humanoid beast with a lion's head and body showed its sharp claws and suddenly grabbed Chen Su. A shrill scream echoed through the sky. This sudden scene changed the expressions of the dozen or so generals who followed Chen Su. "Sir! Sir!" Almost at the same time, hundreds of miles away in the sky, two people, a man and a woman, rode the strong wind and roared towards the north. In the strong wind, Kimeng and Lin An passed through the clouds. Their speed was very fast. In just 10 minutes, they passed through half of the Kyushu territory. And at the next moment, they arrived in the northern land. "Lin, look." Amidst the howling wind, Kimeng looked towards the ground thousands of meters below. After seeing the scene below, her expression was slightly startled. "I saw burning flames and billowing smoke everywhere on the vast plain. One corpse after another was lying on the ground, and the entire land looked like a slaughterhouse." Kimeng murmured, "How could it be? What happened here?" Lin An looked deeply at the plains thousands of meters below and said, "It seems that the matter is more serious than we thought. I am afraid that after your father failed a few days ago, the situation got out of control." Kimeng turned around suddenly, her face turned slightly pale, and said, "You mean?" Lin An said deeply, "The rebels are advancing towards the capital of God." Lin raised his head suddenly, and the expression on his face gradually became serious. Amidst the billowing smoke, they continued flying for dozens of kilometers to the north, and then saw a burning city. The city has been reduced to ruins, and the high-rise buildings and roads inside are dilapidated. A large number of scrapped cars lie on the road and are still burning. Kimeng murmured, "It's Piamiao City, how could it be like this? This is an important city at the prefecture level." Lin raised his head, narrowed his eyes, and said, "I'm going to take the first step. Piamiao City has already fallen. I'm afraid they are not very far away from the capital of gods." In an instant, the air around Lin exploded with bursts of sonic booms. His figure disappeared almost instantly. "Lin, be careful," Kimeng shouted from behind. Almost instantly, they pulled away. It is impossible to imagine how strong Lin An is now. To the north, a fortress hundreds of miles away from the divine capital. Chen Su's body fell heavily from the sky to the ground, and his body rolled out for more than 10 meters. With a sound, Chen Su suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. His right arm was almost torn off completely, and a transparent samurai sword was stuck on his chest. Red blood kept pouring out of his chest. The surrounding town generals immediately helped him up, their faces pale. Chen Su suddenly raised his head, eyes wide open, and shouted, "Beast King Tackle, Moonblade Muramasa. It's you." Above the sky, Griffith, holding his shoulders and hanging there, looked down at the seriously injured Chen Su with a smile. Beside him stood the two men who had just attacked Chen Su. One of them was wearing a pale samurai uniform, holding a translucent samurai sword in his hand, and the billowing sword energy surged around him unbridled. Moonblade Muramasa. In the land of the rising sun adjacent to the Kyushu territory, this man's name is very loud. He is a national-level martial arts god, famous for the moonblade in his hand. He once set a record of killing 10,000 people during the recovery of his spiritual energy. After his sword pierces the enemy's chest, it will leave a transparent shadow on the enemy's chest, making the wound unable to heal. In the land of the rising sun, he is a real madman, a maniac who only knows how to kill. The humanoid giant standing on the other side of Griffin, who is at least 3 meters tall, is the top combat power of another powerful country in the west. Beast King Taklai. His life will gives him the ability to transform into a beast. After activation, his body will undergo huge changes, and his defense and combat power will be greatly improved. Although he is not as famous as Yuan, but among the national level strongmen, his strength is definitely not to be underestimated. Chen Su gritted his teeth, stood up with difficulty, and said, "Sure enough, there are more than just your country Britain standing behind those rebels. It seems that you all want to come to our Jiuzhou region to share a piece of the pie." Griffin hugged his shoulders and smiled. "Yes, your Jiuzhou region has dominated the world for 100 years. Now it's your turn to end." Chen Su bit his teeth stained with blood, raised his head fiercely, and roared, "Then let's see if you have the ability. The barbarians on the border dare to offend my Jiuzhou. Die." The next moment, he forced his blood and launched a charge towards the three national-level powerhouses. Griffin's face suddenly became gloomy and said, "I think you want to die." In an instant, Griffin suddenly stretched out his hand, and a billowing golden flame suddenly burned in his hand. There was no mercy in his eyes. In his opinion, people like Chen Su were not worthy of being his opponent. His target is the capital of the gods, that Chendiaming. Soon, the army under their control will capture the capital of the gods. Chendiaming, aren't you a world-class god of magic? Aren't you so powerful that you don't care about the whole world? After I capture your capital of the gods and burn your Jiuzhou region, I want to see what expression will appear on your face." At that moment, Muramasa and the Beast King narrowed their eyes. The order they received was to bring the rebels to the capital of the gods with Griffin, and to kill anyone who stood in their way. At the moment Griffin took action, their attack followed. "Chen Su," Griffin sneered, "to use your ancient saying, this day next year will be your death anniversary." All the town generals rushed up with a roar. But they were not at the same level at all, and they could not keep up with the speed of the national-level strongmen. "Sir! Mr. Chen Su!" People roared, their eyes were about to burst. But at this moment, when the attacks of the three national-level masters were about to fall on Chen Su, in a trance, a sword sounded from the distant sky. A sword roar that seemed to have cut through the sky and came from tens of thousands of meters in the air. Boom! A sound that made the whole earth tremble. What's going on? Griffin's face changed drastically, and the pupils of Muramasa and the Beast King also suddenly dilated, with stunned expressions on their faces. "I can see the laws of things." Author, Yitiao Xianyue. Chapter 224. Their attacks were like falling on steel plates, and all the offensives were instantly resolved. Griffin's flames were rebounded and almost burned his own hands. The Beast King and Muramasa even retreated more than 10 steps before they could barely stop the huge impact. They looked at the rolling dust in front of them in horror, and instantly felt a huge pressure in their hearts. "Who is it?" Griffin roared, and his face instantly became ferocious. The town generals who were coming to support all stopped, their eyes dull. They originally thought that Chen Su would be torn into pieces in an instant under the attack of the three strong men. But this sudden change was beyond the expectations of all of them. A voice slowly came from the rolling dust. "It seems that I arrived in time, Mr. Chen Su, what do you think?" Chen Su covered the wound on his chest, lying on the ground, looking at the rolling dust with trembling eyes. "Who are you?" Just now he could clearly feel that at the last moment, a figure appeared in the middle of him and the Griffin Three, and took the attack of the four of them. In today's world, only world-class masters can do this. Who is this person? Is there another world-class hidden in their Jiuzhou domain besides Chendiaming? The next moment, a gust of wind blew. Countless dust was blown up to the sky. At the same place, a man in a black robe appeared, holding a pale sword in his hand, and the sword blade was still in the scabbard. Obviously, he just took the attack of the three people by lifting the scabbard in his hand. The moment he saw the man, Chen Su's eyes fell into a sluggish state. That man! Those eyes! Could it be? Chen Su stood up tremblingly and stepped back, saying, You are. The breeze blew up the ends of his hair, and the man slowly said, Lin En. The faces of Griffin and the other two changed drastically in an instant. They had almost no hesitation and instantly pulled hundreds of meters away from Lin En. Their eyes were fixed on Lin En standing there, their pupils trembling uncontrollably, and the trembling in their hearts surged up instantly. Lin En. Griffin trembled. How could it be? This is impossible. But in fact, after seeing Lin En's eyes, he had already recognized his identity. Ever since the news that shocked the world came out from Zhu domain, the whole world has remembered the name Lin En. Even they are no exception. A man who crushed 3 world-class strongmen, wiped out hundreds of top-town generals in one night, and changed the current situation of Zhu domain in one night. In the world, his reputation has been spread to an unimaginable height. A killing god. A man who is bloodthirsty, possesses endless power, and has godlike potential. If they hadn't heard from him for several months, they would never have intervened in the Zhu region. Because, this is tantamount to seeking death. In the shocked eyes of the people around him, Lin En slowly turned his head and looked at Griffin and the other two. His purple eyes were as calm as a deep pool. But I don't know why. He obviously didn't do anything, he just stood there. Griffin and the other two still felt a huge sense of oppression. Standing in front of them was like a mountain. A huge peak with no visible top. Behind him, Chen Su covered his wound and trembled. Are you really Lin En? You are back. That night, when they confronted the 3 major families, he, Chen Su, was also at the scene. He watched closely how Lin En wiped out the 3 world-class masters with a glance after a few seconds. That deep tremor, even now, still lingers in his heart. Lin En said slowly, if I don't come back, Zhu will fall. For some reason, after hearing his words, the people around him suddenly felt relieved. They looked at Lin En's back tremblingly, and seemed to feel that the crisis facing Zhu was nothing at all. Lin En slowly raised his head and looked at Griffin and the other two, and walked towards them calmly, saying calmly. Have you decided? I will kill 2 of you 3, and I will use the other one as a bargaining chip to negotiate with your country and spare his life temporarily. If you have decided, tell me. Lin En said slowly, I can help you end it. As soon as these words came out, the faces of Griffin and the other two changed drastically, and a huge sense of humiliation instantly emerged from their hearts. Contempt. This is naked contempt. He didn't take the 3 of them seriously at all, and he used such a calm tone to casually decide their life and death. Griffin suddenly raised his head and said fiercely. Good. Very good. Then I want to see if the legendary god of death Lin En is really as invincible as the legend says. In an instant, he soared into the sky, and his whole body was burning with blazing golden flames. He raised his hands with a roar, and in an instant, the whole sky was wrapped in dazzling light. I want to see if you can really fight with the 3 of us. Almost at that moment, Muramasa narrowed his eyes, and his body instantly turned into countless after-images. At that moment, he accelerated his speed to almost the speed of light. Under the moonlight, the blade was as sharp as blood. This is his most powerful move. In the past few decades, the number of people who can use this move is no more than 1 hand. The last time he used this move was 10 years ago. The strongest killing move at the beginning. Because he knew that in front of a strong man like Lin En, any temptation would be a dead end. If he didn't use all his trump cards at the beginning, he might not even have a chance to make a move. And success or failure depends on this sword. Clang. A huge metal roar. In that instant, Muramasa came in front of Lin En and slashed out the sword. But the next moment, his pupils suddenly dilated. The moonlight sword in his hand, which had killed countless people, shattered into countless pieces under his gaze after it came into contact with the pale blade in Lin's hand. The mottled fragments were reflected in his trembling pupils like broken crystals. How could it be? His sword was broken. His strongest move became a false move in Lin's casual attack. Lin said slowly, "You are still too slow." In his trembling eyes, the sword in Lin's hand casually swung an arc towards him. The speed was so slow, but for some reason, he could not dodge. It was so slow that it seemed to be a casual attack. But... puff! He lowered his head tremblingly and looked at the wound on his chest that was slowly tearing. At that moment, his pupils suddenly dilated. He understood. It was not slow, but it was so fast that even his eyes could not catch it, so fast that his brain had to construct false movements in front of his eyes to make up for the visual error. In fact, the moment his sword broke, the sword had already cut through his heart. How could there be such a sword? Muramasa muttered, and took a step back. The next moment, blood gushed out from his chest, and blood splashed 5 steps. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xianyue. Chapter 225. Instant kill. When Muramasa's body fell, all the people around him fell into a stagnation. Too fast. So fast that they didn't see clearly what happened just now. When they came to their senses, Muramasa had already fallen to the ground, and the sword in his hand turned into countless fragments. He was ruthlessly crushed to death in just a face-to-face encounter. Chen Su looked at the scene tremblingly, which was beyond his imagination. Lin An still stood there, and his feet didn't even move a bit. He was as calm as a mountain. Even after killing the national-level strongman in seconds, he was calm as if nothing had happened. Seeing this scene, the Beast King subconsciously took a step back, looking at Lin An with fear in his eyes. But he knew that they had no way out. If they attacked with all their strength, there might be a glimmer of hope, but if they ran away, they would definitely be easily solved. Now, their only chance is to gamble their lives to defeat him. The Beast King suddenly clenched his fists, and his eyes were instantly covered with blood. He roared to the sky, his body grew taller, his muscles and bones expanded continuously, and made a gurgling sound. Almost at that moment, he transformed into a humanoid beast that was more than 10 meters tall. The next moment, his figure flashed, and he instantly appeared in front of Lin An, and his huge fist instantly hit Lin An's face. This is his strongest method. After his blood boiled, his strength was magnified hundreds of times in a short time. This full-strength blow can easily destroy a mountain thousands of miles high. Chen Su's face changed drastically, and he said, "Lin An, be careful." But at the moment when he just said this, he was completely stunned. Because the Beast King's fist with a force of 10,000 kilograms was about to fall on Lin An's face, it was firmly restrained by a hand and could not move forward. The terrifying fist wind blew the entire fortress into ruins. Even the dozen or so town commanders were blown away in the fist wind, and they were almost shattered to pieces. But even this ultimate punch could not get any further. The Beast King trembled as he looked at Lin An, who was so close to him, and the fear in his eyes instantly magnified to an unimaginable level. This is impossible. This is absolutely impossible. In the whistling wind, Lin An slowly raised his head, and the Beast King instantly saw the purple eyes under the black hair. "You are too weak," Lin An said slowly. Crack. A crisp sound. The Beast King's pupils suddenly dilated, and he let out an extremely shrill scream. In the shocked eyes of the crowd, they clearly saw that the Beast King's fist was directly crushed into pieces by Lin An with that crisp sound. The Beast King, who was famous for his strength, was actually crushed by someone in terms of strength. The people around him showed an extremely shocked expression. And the next moment, they saw Lin An raised his head. He grabbed the broken fist of the Beast King, pulled it towards him, clenched his fist, and punched the Beast King in the chest. Boom! There was a loud noise. The Beast King's pupils suddenly spit out, and his body almost bent into a cooked red shrimp. In his distracted eyes, his chest was directly sunken in Lin An's punch. The body that could withstand the full force of a world-class strongman was directly shattered in Lin An's punch. Boom! A huge blood hole suddenly exploded in his back, and bloody blood burst out from behind him like a waterfall. This punch actually pierced his body directly. With a wow, the Beast King suddenly spit out a mouthful of bloody blood, his eyes full of disbelief. The breeze blew the ends of Lin An's hair, and Lin An's voice slowly echoed in his ears. This is the power of the fist. With a plop, the huge body of the Beast King fell to the ground, bloody blood spread out from under him, blood mixed with internal organs and minced meat continued to flow out of his mouth, and the light in his pupils completely faded. Crush again. The surrounding town generals, including Chen Su, all looked at the scene in shock. Just 2 encounters, so easily killed 2 national-level strongmen. Could it be that this is Lin An's true strength? What on earth did he go through, what on earth made his current strength so terrifying? Chen Su murmured, with a strong man like Lin An, what else can we worry about in Zhu? Even if the whole world is against us, I am afraid that with his strength alone, he can crush the world. At this moment, his awe of Lin An was like a surging river, unstoppable. With such an invincible person, how can Zhu not stand at the top of the world? Above the sky, witnessing the death of 2 national-level strongmen, the fear in Griffin's eyes has broken through the sky. He still controlled the golden flames, but at this moment, he no longer had the slightest idea of defeating them. Lin An raised his head, looked at him calmly, and said, "It seems that you have made up your mind. Don't worry, I won't kill you. I, Lin An, said I would kill both of you, and I will only kill both of you." Griffin was completely terrified. How could he believe his words? How could he believe the words of a killing god? Killing 2 national-level powerful men was like killing 2 chickens without even batting an eyelid. How could he be an enemy of such a person? Lin An said slowly, "Do you want me to help you surrender?" In an instant, Griffin let out a shrill scream. He poured down the flames from the sky in the direction of Lin An. He didn't even bother to see whether the flames had hit Lin An. The next moment, he frantically broke through the space, frantically trying to get away. How to fight? How to fight, he screamed. From behind, Lin An waved his hand, and the golden flames in the sky instantly turned into countless light spots and disappeared into the air. Lin An said calmly, "It seems that you want me to help you." Griffin, who was running wildly in the jump space, heard those words, and the fear in his eyes almost burst out. The oppressive feeling behind him not only did not weaken, but became more and more intense as he fled. "It's getting more and more intense." He turned around suddenly, and in an instant, his face was covered with dense fear. He saw a hand. A giant hand was grabbing at him. The hand kept dilating in his pupils, and he finally let out a shrill scream again out of great fear. The next moment, they were on the battlefield. The rebels and the Shendu army were fighting madly. "Kill! Kill!" the rebels roared crazily at the army in Shendu. After receiving the help of a large number of great masters and generals, the rebels, who were suppressed in terms of conventional combat power, also quickly suppressed the army of Shendu in a short period of time. "We are about to capture their defenses. Kill them all. Rush out of the divine capital. Uproot the entire Chen family from the 9 provinces." The rebel commander had a cruel smile on his face. He had already received information that the army in Chengdu had received reinforcements, and the reinforcements were none other than Chen Su, the national martial god of the Chen family. Just half an hour ago, the 3 major national powerhouses outside the country had already gone to their hinterland fortress to carry out beheading operations. Judging by the time, they should have succeeded. It is estimated that Chen Su's head has been cut off by them and hung at the highest point of their fortress. Then as long as they kill all the troops in front of them, the city of God will be within easy reach. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I can see the laws of things. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 226. He suddenly pulled out the sword blade in his hand and roared. Charge! Everyone! But at this time, suddenly, in the sky in the center of the fierce fighting battlefield, the space suddenly became distorted. Everyone raised their heads and looked at this sudden change in shock. And at the next moment, the space above the sky suddenly exploded. They instantly saw a disheveled blond man rushing out sadly, but what followed him was a giant hand covering the sky. Click! Under everyone's gaze, the giant hand grabbed the blond man in the palm of his hand. They could clearly hear the crisp sound of the man's bones breaking. The screams echoed through the sky. This scene instantly changed the expressions of everyone present. The rebel commander suddenly raised his head, his pupils dilated instantly, and he looked tremblingly at the blond man held in his hand. Master Griffin. What's going on? What happened? He has recognized that the man caught by the giant hand is the national magic god from the British Empire, Griffin. What the hell is going on? What happened? Everyone in the audience was shocked. They looked at the sky tremblingly, and their legs were already weak under the huge pressure. And the next moment, they saw a figure slowly emerging from the sky. A black robe was fluttering in the air. The man stood high in the sky, holding a white sword in his arms, as calm as if he didn't exist. Like a ghost, he suddenly appeared on the battlefield. In an instant, the huge pressure reached its peak, and everyone on the battlefield couldn't help but want to crawl to the ground. That's... the rebel commander muttered. At that moment, the entire battlefield fell into an eerie silence. Lin An stood in mid-air, looking down at the entire battlefield, and said slowly. I'm Lin, I think you've all heard my name. As soon as these words came out, everyone on the battlefield was startled, and then showed extremely shocked expressions. Lin. It's the god of killing. Is that the god of killing? All the rebels couldn't help but take a step back, looking at the sky with trembling eyes. The commander's expression changed drastically and he said, how is it possible? How could it be him? Didn't he disappear? This is absolutely impossible. Lin's voice rumbled throughout the sky. I am sorry to see the outbreak of this war. I am also sorry to see that you did not accept the rule of Chengdu and became rebellious, and brought these wolves who do not belong to the 9 provinces into our internal disputes. The wind blew the tips of Lin An's hair. He calmly looked down at the densely packed warriors below and said, if it were me a few months ago, I would kill all of you mercilessly and let this land become your final burial ground, but now, I can be lenient to you. Under everyone's trembling gaze, Lin An said slowly. So, I will only kill half of you, but if you continue to resist, I will kill another half. Do you understand? The calm words seemed to echo across the entire battlefield. The rebels at the forefront retreated tremblingly. Finally, under great fear, they dropped their weapons and ran towards the rear, roaring. They want to escape. They want to escape. God of Death. He's back. That man is back. How could they win against a god of death who could crush 3 world-class experts? They don't have any chance. But the next moment, the whole world seemed to fall into silence. Even time stopped at this moment. And in that boundless silence, Lin An's hand grasped the hilt of the sword. Just like that slowly, he took out the pale sword blade from its scabbard. At that moment, the dazzling white light became the only color in the entire sky. The shrill screams were accompanied by horrified eyes, all turned into eternal floating ashes in the dazzling white light. After a few minutes, when the white light dissipated and the soldiers of Chengdu on the battlefield opened their eyes, everyone stood there blankly. No one spoke, no one could describe what they saw. Right in front of them, on top of the rebel position, A sword mark. A sword mark extending from the far east to the far west, hundreds of meters wide and bottomless, suddenly appeared in front of their eyes. It's like a giant has cut a chasm here. An abyss tearing apart heaven and earth. On the other side of the abyss, the remaining rebels slumped on the ground tremblingly. Dead. He literally killed half of them. Tens of thousands of troops were completely annihilated under this sword. It was like a divine punishment, like a chasm descended from the heavens, everything was wiped out in this abyss. And right at the edge of the abyss, they saw the man. He held the pale sword and walked towards the north step by step, the robe behind him fluttering with the strong wind. At this moment, their fear of that person exceeded the limit. Go back and tell your leader that I, Lin, am back. I will go find him soon. I will not allow a divided Kyushu region to appear in this world. Lin's voice echoed throughout the sky. That extremely calm voice is even more frightening than the whispers of demons in hell. Since the great changes in the Kyushu territory, in the past few months, the eyes of the entire world have been staring at every move in the Kyushu territory. A few months ago, hundreds of top combatants in the Kyushu region died, 3 of the 4 world-class experts died, 1 was seriously injured, and Lin En, the god of killing who killed those 3 world-class experts, disappeared. Under this situation, the Kyushu territory has almost reached its weakest period in history. Ever since, all the major forces in the world have intervened, hoping to get a share of this great change. Because between countries, there is no eternal friendship, only eternal interests. When you are big, everyone will compliment you, but when you are weak, they will immediately insult you. Therefore, when there was a split within the Juzhu territory and Chen Daoming was seriously injured and unable to control the overall situation, one black hand after another reached out to the Juzhu territory. With their help, the rebels from the 8 Clans Alliance became unstoppable and took over the divine capital. In their opinion, unless Chen Daoming risked his life to defeat the enemy, it would be easy for the rebels to capture Chengdu. So when the news came that the rebels had been defeated in the north, the whole world was shocked. How is this possible? On the eastern border, within the conference hall of the 8 Nationalities Alliance, the expressions of the supreme rulers representing the 8 top cities all changed drastically. This time heading north, they gathered almost all the troops they could muster. With a mighty force of nearly 100,000, and coupled with many top-level combat forces supported by foreign forces, they are unstoppable. It's Lin, the soldier who reported the news, raised his head with a pale face and said tremblingly, "He's back. This time, the national powerhouses who followed us, Muramasa and Beast King, have been killed by him. Lord Griffin of Britain was captured by him. He killed half of us with just one sword. Army." As soon as these words came out, the faces of the 8 commanders instantly turned pale. They suddenly sat weakly on their chairs, their eyes gradually dulling. How is this possible? He can destroy tens of thousands of my troops with one sword. How can he be so powerful? I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xianyue. Chapter 227. The 8 of them are all national-level masters. They were not present when the 3 world-class masters died. Although rumors say that it was Lin En who killed the patriarchs of the 3 major families that day. But they don't believe it. Because they have thoroughly investigated Lin En during this period. His strength has indeed grown rapidly, and he is the best in the world. But this definitely does not mean that he really has the strength to kill the 3 world-class masters alone. They believe that the battle must have been led by Chen Daoming, with Lin En as the auxiliary, and finally completed the hunt with difficulty. But when this news came, they wavered. Bailey Sen stood up suddenly, his eyes bloodshot, and said, "What else did he say?" He was a member of the Bailey family branch. He was not present in the battle that day, but guarded the border. After learning that the main family was destroyed, he smelled this excellent opportunity for rebellion, and finally, Under his connection, he summoned the remaining members of the three major families to form an 8-family alliance. The warrior raised his head and trembled. He also said that he would not watch a divided Kyushu region appear in this world. He wants you to be prepared. He will come to us. After these words came out, Bala-sen sat down on the chair tremblingly. He murmured, "If we fight him head-on, do you think the 8 of us have a chance of winning?" An old man sitting opposite him raised his head and said, "He can easily kill Muramasa and the Beast King and capture Griffin. This has proved his strength. Even if it is a conservative estimate, his current realm is at least world-class. Facing a world-class strongman, the 8 of us really have no chance of winning." After these words came out, the hearts of the other 6 people instantly fell to the bottom. That's right. The gap between national level and world level is like an ant to an eagle. The two are not on the same level at all. Not to mention the 8 of them, even if there are another 80 people, it will not make any difference. Bala-sen gritted his teeth, his eyes bloodshot, and said, "Do we just have to sit and wait for death? That Lin-an is bloodthirsty. They dare to touch even our clan. Who else in this world is he afraid to touch? He will definitely not let us go." The other 6 people all looked gray and their eyes were sad. If Chen Daoming is the kind of wise and calm person who puts the overall situation first, then Lin-an is just the opposite of him. He is a demon who does whatever he wants and determines the value of the other person's existence based on his personal preferences. If he wants to kill you, he doesn't need any reason. Just kill him. Such people don't care about anything. They are born demons. But just as the 7 people were gradually despairing, suddenly, a voice came from outside the door. "Are you afraid?" The 7 people quickly raised their heads and looked out the door. A black figure walked towards them step by step, and the sunlight outside seemed to be avoiding him. "You are." Bala-sen stood up in horror and said. The man slowly raised his head. Under the dark hood, his scarlet eyes were like a blood fountain surging in hell. "Since we in Britain have decided to help you, we will naturally not watch you chess pieces being crushed. In the past 100 years, this is the only opportunity to subvert your Jiuzhou region. If we don't hold it firmly in our hands, do we have to continue to watch you rise?" His voice made people tremble. His words were full of contempt and cruelty. Bala-sen and the others only felt a wave of trembling in their hearts, as if there was a cold wind sweeping through their hearts. Although they knew that the 8 of them and the so-called 8 clans alliance were just chess pieces supported by those powerful forces outside the country. But it still made them feel angry to be so pointed out in front of them. But they didn't dare to refute. Behind the man, people in black robes walked in one after another. The aura exuded by each person was far greater than theirs, making them shiver. The man slowly raised his head and said word by word. "Since he will come to you, then I will wait for him here. I really want to know if he really has the strength to crush the world class. Does he really have the power to crush my Haijal? Northern God capital." In the Chen family manor, many town generals and national-level strongmen gathered here. After Chen Daoming was seriously injured, they did not dare to leave at all. Because in the past few months, Chen Daoming has suffered at least a dozen assassinations. If Chen Daoming died, then the entire Jiuzhou region would really become a fat sheep in the mouths of countries around the world. It is precisely because of this that their top combat power was firmly locked in the God capital. News from the front has come back. Lin-an has returned and killed 3 powerful foreign nationals in one fell swoop, and single-handedly destroyed the rebels' offensive. Now the rebels are like frightened birds, and our army is sweeping towards the south. In a few hours, we have captured at least 15,000 rebels and eliminated 8,000 stubborn rebels. This is a great victory. This is a great victory. The entire Chen family, everyone looked excited. They never expected that Lin-an would return in a few months. And with his invincible appearance, he instantly helped the Chen family to sweep away all enemies from the outside world. Where is Lin En? Where is he now? Chen Daolin quickly stepped forward, looking at the intelligence officer with a burning gaze, his expression excited. He is Chen Daoming's younger brother. Although he is much younger than Chen Daoming, he is now white-haired and wrinkled. His qualifications are not as good as his elder brother, and he has not become a world-class strongman, which makes him old. After Chen Daoming was seriously injured, he, as the most senior person in the Chen family, is now in charge of the overall situation of Shendu. The soldier clasped his fists and said, "Venerable Lin En will rest for a while at the front line, and then he will go to Shendu with Miss Kimeng to meet Mr. Chen Daoming. According to the time, they should be on the way now." After hearing this, Chen Daolin looked extremely excited. Now that Lin En has returned, it can be said to be a timely help for their Chen family and the entire Jiuzhou region. Quick, he turned around immediately and said excitedly, "Get moving immediately and prepare to welcome Lin En and the eldest lady." But at this moment, there was a sudden sound of breaking through the air in the sky. A voice came. "No need." The next moment, a man and a woman fell from the sky. The man was dressed in a black robe and had a pale sword on his waist. The woman was beautiful, like a banished fairy. It was Lin En and Qi Meng. When the Chen family's strong men saw the two, the excitement in their eyes almost burst out. The next moment, everyone knelt on one knee and said to Lin En, "Meet the venerable Lin En, the eldest lady." If it were normal, they would be elders and should not kneel down with such a great ceremony. But today, after witnessing the scene of Lin En crushing the three world-class strong men a few months ago, in their hearts, Lin En's status is no less than Chen Daoming. And as soon as he returned, he solved the imminent crisis of the capital of the gods with an invincible posture. This made their respect for Lin En reach a peak again. Lin En deserves this respect. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xianyue. Chapter 228. Lin En said nothing. His face was calm. Holding the sword, he strode towards the interior of the Chen family. "Take me to see Chen Daoming." He was not moved by such a scene. Because in the 3,000 years of dream, he was invincible in the world. People from all directions came to pay tribute to him. The world respected him. Tens of thousands of people knelt down to worship him. It was not uncommon. Yes, Chen Daolin stood up quickly and led the way for Lin En. Even he didn't know why, but he felt that Lin En now seemed to have changed a lot from a few months ago. All the people around who witnessed the events of that day had this feeling. They raised their heads and stared at Lin En's back. In an instant, for some reason, they felt that they should kneel down to him. Just like this matter, it was natural. Although his breath was peaceful, they felt that he had a different temperament compared to a few months ago. It was like a monarch who had been in a high position for a long time and had already looked down on the world for many years, and it was like a true immortal standing on the top of a mountain, which had transcended the mortal world. This kind of temperament was difficult for even Chen Daoming to compare with. What happened? They stared at Lin En's back in a daze. What did they experience in the past few months? Soon, Lin En and Qi Meng came to the deepest part of Chen's manor under the leadership of Chen Daolin. There was a guard every 2 steps here, and the security was strict. Obviously, Chen Daoming's physical condition had deteriorated. Before arriving at the gate, Chen Daolin's expression gradually became solemn. Because only he knew the situation of his eldest brother. "My eldest brother is inside," Chen Daolin said in a complicated way. "Lin En, Qi Meng, you go in, my eldest brother's situation is not good." Lin En nodded, he grabbed Qi Meng's hand, and was about to go out. But suddenly he felt Qi Meng standing there, but was unwilling to take a step. Lin En turned his head, but saw Qi Meng standing there in a complicated way, lowering her head, biting her lips, unwilling to step forward. There was a deep conflict between her and her father. Whenever they met in the past, they would be cold to each other. So, she didn't know what expression to put on when she met her father. Lin An looked into her eyes and said slowly, "Don't you want to see your father?" Chi Meng said in a complicated way, "I don't know how to face him." Lin An smiled slightly, stretched out his hand to hold her slender waist, and said, "I know you have a knot in your heart. Your father deceived you to leave Jianghai City. You hate him, but you also love him. If not, you wouldn't save him at all costs that day." Chi Meng raised her head and stared at his eyes in a daze, then she lowered her head and fell into silence. Lin An said softly, "If you want to resolve your knot, this is an opportunity. I don't want to see your father-daughter relationship continue to be so deadlocked." Chi Meng bit her lip for a long time, then nodded silently, letting Lin An hold her hand and walk towards the door. With a creak, the door opened. The room was very simple. A chair, a table, and a few pieces of furniture. It is hard to imagine that this is the home of Chen Daoming, the supreme ruler of Zhuzhou. On the bed, Chen Daoming was lying on the bed. "Lin An, Chi Meng, you are back." Chen Daoming smiled weakly. "I have heard about the matter. Lin An, you did a good job. You should be so decisive to deal with them." Lin An looked at Chen Daoming lying on the bed. He looked so unrecognizable now. With gray hair and pale face, he looked like an old man in his twilight years. He no longer looked like before. Lin An sat down on the bed, nodded, and said, "How are you now?" Chen Daoming shook his head and said, "Luo Chuan was ruthless and had been planning to kill me for who knows how long. His two swords directly pierced my vital point and damaged my life wheel. Although I am now using a powerful medicine to keep my life wheel is damaged and cannot be powered. Once it is powered, it will affect the foundation." Chi Meng's face changed, and she suddenly raised her head and looked at Chen Daoming. She wanted to say something, but when the words came to her lips, she couldn't say it. She gritted her teeth and turned her head suddenly. Chen Daoming looked at the expression on his daughter's face, smiled bitterly, and said, "Lin En, actually there is something I have always wanted to say sorry to you. The first time I knew you was not in Jianghai City more than half a year ago. In fact, I knew that there was a person like you in Jianghai City several years ago." Lin An said slowly, "I know." Chi Meng turned her head, clenched her fists tightly, and her eyes were wet. That's right, he knew Lin An a long time ago. Chen Daoming raised his head, closed his eyes, and said sadly, "Things change, and I really didn't expect that you would end up together. Back then, Chi Meng left Chengdu and went south to Jianghai. I actually saw it all the time. I also knew about your relationship in Jianghai City." Lin An fell into silence. Chi Meng couldn't help the emotions in her heart. She turned her head suddenly, her eyes red, and said, "Yes, you always knew. When you knew that I had found happiness, you used that despicable means to trick me to leave Jianghai. If it weren't for you, so many things wouldn't have happened later." Chen Daoming said sadly, "You are right, I can't refute it. At that time, I didn't think highly of your relationship, because you are my daughter, Chen Daoming, and you will inherit my throne in the future. At that time, Lin An had not yet shown the potential that was different from ordinary people, so it was difficult for me to entrust my daughter to an ordinary person." Chi Meng turned her head suddenly, her eyes were red, and tears fell from her eyes. Chen Daoming turned his head and looked at Lin En, his eyes full of guilt and pain. "Lin En, you have the right to blame me. If it weren't for my selfishness at that time, you might have developed better." Lin En fell silent. Yes, after learning about everything from Chi Meng, there was indeed a period of time when he felt angry with Chen Daoming. Because it was not long after Chi Meng left him that he became disabled during a mission. If it weren't for the appearance of the Eye of Law, he would probably still be confused and panic in Jianghai City all day long. but Lin En raised his head and looked at the sky outside the window. After the baptism of 3,000 years, he had already shed all his impetuousness. He had experienced the love between men and women, the separation of life and death, and was swept by the world of mortals and drifted for life after life. His state of mind had already undergone a huge change. What is destined to happen must happen, and what is not destined to happen should not be forced. All of this is just a wave in the world of mortals. But when the world collapses and the end of the world comes, what is the use of this world of mortals thousands of miles away? Lin En came back to his senses. Looking at Chen Daoming's guilty eyes, he shook his head slowly and said, "Those are all in the past, the focus is on the present. Looking at the future, what else is there to be worried about?" Yes. If you are obsessed with the past and find it difficult to let go, you will only sink deeper and deeper in the torrent of the world. Hearing his words, Chen Dao stared at Lin En for a long time. He also felt that Lin En, who was sitting in front of him now, had really changed a lot. He was like a fairy standing at the top, having long transcended the mortal world. His peaceful eyes were hard to touch. For a moment, for some reason, he suddenly felt that Lin En was like a real god. Transcendent and peaceful, not stubborn, not fierce, but not indifferent, nor an absolutely rational machine. With just that one look, he felt that Lin En's state of mind at this moment had far surpassed his. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 229. Chen Daoming said in a daze, "You have changed." Lin En smiled calmly and said, "Because I have experienced a lot, I have been able to look away." Chen Daoming looked at him for a long time. Suddenly, he burst out laughing, tears streaming down his face, and he coughed uncontrollably. Chen Daoming. Chen Daoming, it's useless for you to think that you are invincible all your life, and for the hundreds of years you have been training your mind, you think that your character is firm. In the end, you are indeed worse than an ordinary person. A whole dozen years. For more than 10 years, he didn't think it was his fault. Because he is the highest ruler of the 9 provinces, he controls everything, and he thinks that he can never be wrong. He will always find various reasons to excuse himself. Because even if he is wrong, he will not admit it. Why did he fail to attack the demigod realm again and again? Why has he remained stagnant as a world-class Dharma god for decades? In the past, he thought it was his lack of strength. But now, he finally understands. It was his heart that had not reached that state at all. The thing that hindered his progress was always himself. He got up from the bed with difficulty, coughing non-stop. Lin wanted to help him, but he shook his head, gritted his teeth, and got out of bed step by step. Kimeng still clenched her fists tightly, gritted her teeth, and remained silent. And under the gazes of the two of them, Chen Daoming bent his knees and knelt down. I was wrong. This kneeling was beyond Kimeng's expectation, causing Kimeng's expression to change drastically. This kneeling caused some changes in Lin En's eyes when she looked at him. He knew why Chen Daoming was kneeling. He was kneeling not only for him and Kimeng, but for his entire past. I was wrong. For so many years, I have been on this road of self-righteousness, going further and further, and missed too many opportunities to make up for it. To you, to Kimeng, to Banmen, and to my wife, I made mistakes again and again, but until just now, I didn't know what I had done wrong. Now I finally understand. I thought I was taking the overall situation into consideration and waited 10 years for my wife's death to be revealed. I thought it was for Kimeng's good that I kept her under house arrest for so many years. I never considered her thoughts. Half a dream was in Japan. I was tortured under the threat of death day after day, but I never stayed with her for a moment. I always had various reasons to explain and excuse myself. I was wrong. He held his hand tightly. At this moment, the highest ruler of the 9 provinces, who was invincible in everyone's eyes, was actually crying and choking. Drops of turbid tears fell from his eyes to the ground. He kept talking, his entire past laid out in front of him. Lin An looked at this man who was actually very old and closed his eyes deeply. The moment I stepped into this hut, I saw his gray hair and his haggard look. Lin An knew that the biggest problem he encountered was no longer the damage to his life wheel. Powerful power is like a poison. When you have it, it will blind your eyes subtly, allowing you to live under the control of power and gradually lose your mind. Maybe only after you lose it, you will see many things clearly at that moment. These few months have also given Chen Daoming an opportunity to face his past. The meaning of his kneeling was, in a sense, proof that he had finally crossed the threshold in his heart. This kneeling means detachment. Only when you face your entire past and let go of all obsessions can your character be truly sublimated. In a sense, Chen Daoming has already done it. Time passed by minute by minute. The sky outside the window was already as dusk as blood. Chen Daoming's hair turned white one by one in this moment. Now he is no longer the supreme ruler of the 9 provinces, nor is he the world-class Dharma god. He was just an ordinary old man, a poor man who at the last moment of his life was trying to atone for his entire past. On the cold floor, Chen Daoming was kneeling there helplessly. The white hair on his head made him extremely vicissitudes of life. Finally, a slender hand grabbed his arm, and Kemeng silently knelt in front of him. "Father, get up." The white-haired Chen Daoming raised his head aimlessly and looked at his daughter in front of him. Kemeng said in a low voice, "No daughter in the world, really hates her parents to the core. Now everything is over, just like Lin An said just now, focus on the future. Daughter, I forgive you." At that moment, Chen Daoming didn't know why he suddenly lost control of his emotions. It was only when he stretched out his hand that he realized that his face was already wet. There is nothing left to say. He knew that there was no chance to make amends for many things, and he did not expect to be forgiven by the one he loved that he owed something to. But when he really heard these 4 short words, he couldn't help but burst into tears. Lin An's eyes also flashed with warmth, and he smiled. "Kemeng, you stay with your father while I go for a walk." Kemeng lowered her head and nodded gently. She knew what Lin An meant. Today might be the only day that could untie the knot between father and daughter. Lin slowly closed the door. He raised his head and looked at the setting sun at dusk. He knew that after today, Chen Daoming's state of mind had crossed that bottleneck. He may become the first person in this world who can step into the realm of demigods. Lin An looked at the sky sadly. If it weren't for 3,000 years of mental training, he would actually still have a long way to go. Because practicing this path will never be that simple. Wait until nightfall. The door opened. Kemeng helped the white-haired Chen Daoming out. There were still unwiped tears on Kemeng's fair cheeks, and her eyes were red, but from the look of her, the knot between father and daughter was probably almost untied. Lin Chen Daoming said, "Thank you. Without you, I probably wouldn't be as enlightened as I am today." Lin An hugged Bai Jian and said with a smile, "Haha, even without me, you will definitely be able to overcome this obstacle. After all, you are the supreme ruler of our Kyushu territory." Chen Daoming smiled bitterly and said, "The supreme ruler is just one person in the final analysis." He raised his head and looked at Lin An and said, "Lin, there is actually something I have been thinking about for a long time." Lin asked, "Oh?" Chen Daoming took a deep breath, looked into his eyes, and said, "I want to hand over the 9 provinces territory to you to rule." As soon as she said this, Kemeng raised her head in shock and looked at her father's profile. Lin An didn't feel that surprised. He hugged Bai Jian and said, "Do you want to let go?" Chen Daoming closed his eyes deeply and said, "My life will was damaged. Although the knot in my heart is now untied, even if I can continue to survive, I no longer have the strength to shock the world." Although Kameng's strength has improved, quickly, but her character is still not good enough to become the supreme ruler of Kyushu territory. Banmen is still young, but even if I want her to take over this position, she will definitely refuse. And now looking at the entire Joseon territory, the only one who has the strength and can take on this important position is you, Lin En. I can rest assured that I will hand over the Joseon territory to you now. Lin En smiled slightly and said, "Ha, letting go so easily is not the Chen Daoming I know. Do you think that if the life will is damaged, all strength will be lost? Have you forgotten that what I, Lin En, are best at doing? What is it?" As soon as these words came out, Chen Daoming was startled, and his eyes suddenly froze slightly. "How could I forget? Lin. What he's best at is." Lin En raised his head, and a dazzling purple light suddenly lit up in his eyes. "Isn't it just that the life will is damaged? Do you really think it is some kind of fatal injury? I can see the laws of things." Author, Yi Tiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 230. At that moment, Lin En's fingers covered Chen Daoming's chest. A spinning roulette instantly appeared on his chest. That's his life wheel. The roulette wheel that represents space. At that moment, Chen Daoming's pupils suddenly dilated, under his extremely shocked gaze. He clearly felt that his broken life wheel was recovering bit by bit. One long stream after another built his new life wheel. He couldn't help it, he looked up to the sky and screamed. At that moment, a dazzling light instantly illuminated the entire night sky. Everyone in the Chen family raised their heads and stared at the light soaring into the sky in astonishment. What light is that? What happened? All the strong men in the Chen family were alarmed by the light shining in the sky, and they immediately ran towards the direction where Chen Daoming lived. That light that soars into the sky comes from there. Could it be that something happened to their family head? Brother! Master! Chen Daolin and others rushed into the courtyard eagerly. And the next moment, everyone was stunned. The white-haired Chen Daoming stood there with his eyes closed, and silver rays of light surged all over his body. They clearly saw that the life wheel floating on Chen Daoming's chest was intact. The master's life wheel. A strong man from the Chen family trembled. It has been restored. That's right. Absolutely nothing wrong. The intact life wheel, and the aura of a world-class powerhouse exuding from Chen Daoming. Their patriarch's strength has been restored. What happened? How did their family leader's life wheel recover? Brother, Chen Daolin was extremely excited. He wanted to move forward, but was immediately blocked by Lin En. Lin En raised the corner of his mouth and said, "Now is not the time to disturb him." Chen Daolin was stunned and subconsciously looked at his eldest brother standing there with his eyes closed. For a moment, there was a palpitation in his heart. He felt an indescribable new aura in Chen Daoming's body. A force that is superior to world-class experts. Boom! A loud bang. Chen Daolin's mind went blank. He looked at his eldest brother blankly and murmured. Could it be that, big brother, is breaking through to the demigod realm? As soon as this statement came out, everyone in the audience was shocked. They looked at Chen Daoming in disbelief. All of them knew that their family leader had been impacting the realm of demigods in the past few years. But for so many years, there has never been a success. Could it be said that the head of the family really wants to break through and become the world's first powerful person in the demigod realm today? Lin En hugged Baijian, raised the corner of his mouth, looked up at Chen Daoming, and said. His strength has already reached the breaking point. What he lacks is the state of mind of a demigod. Now that he has enlightened himself, he will naturally reach the sky and become a demigod. The strong man from the Chen family looked at Lin En blankly. They had already vaguely felt that their family leader's ability to restore his life will and even attack the demigods was probably closely related to Lin En. Because in this world, there is only one person who can heal Dao injuries. That person is Lin. Chen Daoming's breakthrough lasted until the second half of the night. When the stars dimmed in the middle of the night, suddenly, a dazzling light shot straight into the sky, stirring up the sea of clouds all over the sky. Under everyone's gaze, the white-haired Chen Daoming slowly floated up. He is like a star that constantly radiates light and heat. Everyone in the entire courtyard stared blankly at this scene, even holding their breath. Lin En smiled slightly and said slowly, "It seems that it was successful." The next moment he finished speaking. All of a sudden, the light in the sky shrank and converged on Chen Daoming's body. Boom! There was a huge shock that made everyone in the yard unsteady. Even the entire god was rumbling and trembling in this vibration. Countless people in the city raised their heads in shock and stared at the sky in horror, not knowing what was happening. In mid-air, Chen Daoming's white hair was flying. He looked up to the sky and took a deep breath, saying, "It's all gone." At that moment, his entire impression changed dramatically. A trace of detachment, a trace of confusion, but mostly peace. He almost no longer had the powerful aura of a world-class Dharma god, and he looked like an ordinary person in his hometown. An extremely ordinary person. But everyone knows that at this moment, Chen Daoming is far more powerful than ever before. Chen Daoming slowly fell from the sky. He walked towards the crowd with his hands behind his back. Everyone looked at their master blankly. His younger brother Chen Daolin stepped forward tremblingly and said, "Eldest brother, have you made a breakthrough?" Chen Daoming said calmly, "I have been pursuing this realm for decades, and now that I have achieved it, it makes people full of emotions, because I don't feel the slightest joy in my heart, but no matter what." The wind blew his white hair, and he said slowly, "I achieved the status of demigod." As soon as these words came out, the entire Chen family looked at Chen Daoming with trembling eyes. This sentence shocked them unimaginably. Their patriarch actually achieved the supreme realm that no one had ever achieved before. The next moment, all the people in the Chen family knelt down to Chen Daoming and said in unison, "Congratulations to the patriarch for achieving the status of a demigod." They were excited and extremely happy. Because their patriarch's achievement of the status of a demigod was of unimaginable significance to them. Not only will the 9 provinces be glorious, but more importantly, he has opened up a path for the entire world. He has already walked at the forefront of all human practitioners today. He has become a pioneer. Chen Daoming looked at all the people kneeling on the ground, then raised his head and looked at Lin En, who was standing not far away with a sword in his arms and smiling without saying a word. He went up to them, and under the stunned gaze of everyone, he bent one knee and presented a great gift to Lin En. Chen Daoming's eyes were slightly red as he said, "Lin En, I don't know how to thank you. Not only did you help me get past the threshold that had troubled me for decades, you also cured my fate and made me advance by leaps and bounds. My Zhu territory, my Chen family can have you, which is the blessing that I, Chen Daoming, have cultivated for all eternity." If he used to value Lin En as an investment in Lin En's future, then now, he really wants to submit to Lin En. Because even though he has achieved the status of a demigod now, he actually found that he still couldn't see through the man standing in front of him. This is not a superiority in strength, but a superiority in state of mind. It's like the man standing in front of you is a real god. The people of the Chen family who were kneeling on the ground around them also looked at Chen Daoming in shock. Although they had already vaguely guessed in their hearts that it might be Lin En who helped their patriarch achieve the status of a demigod. But when Chen Daoming really admitted it, they were still extremely shocked. Lin En. He is really getting stronger and stronger, which also proves that Chen Daoming's choice at that time was absolutely correct. He brought an unsurpassed top person to the Chen family and Zhu.